Little girl's house was demolished. She calls her mum's first contact, not knowing she'd inherit a mansion. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type "love" in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The morning sun cast long shadows across the small duplex on Maple Street, where Sarah Chen wiped her hands on her faded apron and glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, she'd wake the girls for another day of making miracles happen on minimum wage. Madison, her 9-year-old with eyes too wise for her age, was already stirring in the bed she shared with her twin sisters, Chloe and Zoe, both 6 and identical, except for the tiny freckle on Chloe's left cheek. The blonde curls that all 3 girls inherited from their father cascaded across pillowcases that Sarah had sewn from old bed sheets, because buying new ones meant choosing between breakfast and bedding. "Mommy?" Madison's sleepy voice drifted from the bedroom. "Is today the day we get the big surprise?" Sarah's heart clenched. For weeks, the girls had been asking about the official-looking envelopes that kept arriving, the ones with the red stamps and urgent language that Sarah couldn't read. At 38, she carried the shame of her illiteracy like a stone in her chest, a secret that had cost her jobs, relationships, and now maybe their home. "Every day is a surprise, baby," she called back, forcing brightness into her voice while staring at the latest stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. The duplex had been a gift from heaven when David, her ex-boyfriend, and the girl's stepfather figure left it to them before his sudden death 2 years ago. She'd never understood the legal papers, just knew that the house was theirs. Free and clear, David had promised. A safe place for his girls to grow up. A mechanical rumble outside made her freeze mid-step. Through the thin curtains, she glimpsed the impossible. Construction vehicles lined up like an army, their yellow hulks gleaming in the morning light. Men in hard hats were unloading equipment, pointing at her house, checking clipboards with the efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. The lead foreman, a weathered man with arms like tree trunks, was walking toward her front door. Sarah's legs felt like water. This couldn't be happening, not to them. Not when she'd finally started believing that maybe, just maybe, luck was on their side for once. The knock came hard and official, 3 sharp raps that sounded like Judgment Day. "Ma'am!" The foreman's voice carried the weight of bad news. "I'm Jim Morrison from Morrison Demolition. We're here regarding the foreclosure and demolition order for this property. You should have received multiple notices." The words hit her like physical blows. Foreclosure, demolition. The unopened envelopes suddenly made terrible sense. "There's been a mistake," she whispered, her throat closing. "This house is ours. It was left to us. We own it." Morrison consulted his clipboard with the bored precision of a man who'd heard every excuse. "Ma'am, according to our records, this property was seized for unpaid taxes and fees totaling $47,000. The previous owner never transferred legal ownership, and the estate never settled the debts. We have a court order to begin demolition at 8 a.m. sharp." "Unpaid taxes?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "But David said, he promised." "I'm sorry, ma'am. We need you and any occupants to vacate immediately." "You have 30 minutes to gather essential belongings." Through the thin walls, she could hear the girls waking up, their sleepy chatter mixing with the growing mechanical symphony outside. Chloe was singing the alphabet song. Zoe was probably arranging her stuffed animals in the precise order she required every morning. Madison would be helping them dress, being the little mother she'd learned to be too young. 30 minutes to pack up their entire lives. "Please," Sarah begged, grabbing the man's arm. "Please, there has to be something. I work 3 jobs. I can pay. Just give me time." "Ma'am, this has been in the system for over 2 years. The final notice period expired 6 months ago." His expression softened slightly. "Look, I got kids too, but I don't make the rules. I just follow the orders." The sound of the first bulldozer starting up was like a death knell. Sarah ran back inside, her mind reeling. How could she explain this to the girls? How could she tell them that the home where they'd felt safe, where Madison had learned to read, where the twins had taken their first steps, was about to be erased? "Mommy, why are there big trucks outside?" Madison appeared in the doorway, already dressed and herding her sisters, who were rubbing sleep from their eyes. We have to go somewhere for a while, baby." Sarah's voice broke despite her efforts. "Pack your favorite things, quickly." Madison's eyes went wide, with an understanding that no 9-year-old should possess. "Are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-up things happen that aren't anyone's fault." Sarah was throwing clothes into plastic bags, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip anything. "Remember the game we play about being brave adventurers?" The twins caught the urgency and started crying. Zoe clutched her worn teddy bear while Chloe reached for Madison's hand, seeking comfort from the sister, who always had answers. Outside, the mechanical orchestra was growing louder, truck doors slamming, men shouting coordinates, the systematic preparation for destroying everything they'd built. "I'll be right back," Sarah told the girls, her voice steadier than she felt. "Madison, help your sisters pack just the important stuff." She ran outside, wild-eyed and desperate, scanning the street for anyone who might help, a police car, a neighbor who might witness this injustice. Anyone who could stop this nightmare. The foreman was directing a massive excavator into position. "Ma'am, you need to clear the premises now. We're beginning demolition." "Wait! I need to call someone. Sarah patted her pockets frantically. Her phone. Where was her phone? She'd left it inside, on the kitchen counter, right next to the unopened mail that had sealed their fate. "I'll call the police. This is illegal. You can't just destroy someone's home." But even as she shouted, she knew the terrible truth. This was legal. The paper she couldn't read had probably explained everything. The warning she'd ignored because she was too ashamed to ask for help had led to this moment. She ran toward Main Street, praying she'd find help, leaving everything she'd worked for crumbling behind her. Madison watched her mother disappear around the corner, running like she was being chased by monsters. Through the window, she could see the big yellow machines getting closer to their house, and men with hard hats talking and pointing. The twins were crying louder now, and that made Madison's chest feel tight. She was the big sister. When Mommy wasn't there, it was her job to take care of Chloe and Zoe. Hey, she said, kneeling down to their level. "Remember what Mommy always says. We're brave like lions, right?" "I don't want to be a lion," Chloe sobbed. "I want to stay home." "Are the big trucks going to hurt our house?" Zoe asked, pressing her face against Madison's shoulder. Madison didn't know what to say. The trucks looked mean and hungry, and the men outside didn't look like they were here to fix things. Through the thin walls, she could hear them getting closer. That's when she saw Mommy's phone on the kitchen counter, the black case cracked from when it fell down the stairs last month. An idea formed in her 9-year-old mind. Mommy always said that when there was an emergency, you called someone for help. And Mommy had lots of numbers in her phone. Maybe someone could save their house. "Stay here," she told the twins. "I'm going to call someone." Don't leave us," Chloe grabbed her arm. "I'm not leaving. I'm getting help, just like in the movies." Madison had watched Mommy use the phone hundreds of times. She knew you had to swipe and tap the green button. The phone was heavy in her small hands, but she managed to open it. The contact list made her heart beat faster. So many names, but she didn't know most of them. She scrolled past Angela, work, and Dr. Patterson and food pantry until she saw something that made perfect sense for what was happening. Emergency. David had programmed this number years ago, telling Sarah it was for when the girls really need help and I'm not there. Sarah had never used it, too proud to reach out, but she'd kept it because David had insisted it was important. Madison had never met her real father, but Mommy had told her that daddies were supposed to protect their families. Maybe this daddy could protect them now. She pressed the green button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Through the window, she could see a big machine with metal teeth moving toward their garden, where Mommy grew tomatoes. "Ring, ring, please answer," she whispered. "Please, please answer." On the 4th ring, a man's voice came through the speaker, deep and serious, like the voices on Mommy's work calls. "This is James." Madison's heart leapt. He answered. The daddy answered. "Daddy?" Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. "Daddy, they're trying to knock down our house. There are big trucks and they're being mean to Mommy, and I don't know what to do, and—" Silence. Complete silence from the other end. "Daddy, are you there?" Who is this?" The man's voice sounded strange, confused. "It's me, Madison, your little girl. Mommy's crying, and there are men with hard hats, and they say we have to leave, and I'm scared, and Chloe and Zoe are crying, and I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out in a rush, her 9-year-old vocabulary struggling to capture the enormity of what was happening. Another long pause. Madison could hear the man breathing. "Madison," he said slowly, like he was testing the name. "How old are you, sweetheart?" "9. I'm 9, and my sisters are 6, and we're good kids, Daddy, we really are. We clean our rooms and help Mommy, and we don't ask for expensive things. Please don't let them take our house away." And on the other end of the line, James Worthington sat frozen in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Worthington Tower. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled below him like a conquered kingdom, but all he could focus on was the small, terrified voice calling him Daddy. He didn't have children, had never been married. At 42, he'd built an empire, but had always been too focused on business for family. But this child, she sounded so real, so frightened. "Madison, honey," he said carefully. "What's your mummy's name?" "Sarah. Sarah Chen. She works really hard, Daddy. She has 3 jobs, and she's tired all the time, but she makes us pancakes on Sundays, and she sings to us when we're scared." Madison's voice was getting smaller. "Are you really my daddy?" "Mummy said my daddy was far away, but that he loved me anyway." Sarah Chen. The name meant nothing to him. "Where are you, Madison? What's your address?" "We live on Maple Street, 247 Maple Street. In the blue house with the white fence, but the fence is broken and Mommy says we'll fix it when we have money." Through the phone, James could hear commotion in the background. Mechanical sounds, men shouting. "Daddy, they're getting closer to our house. The big truck with teeth is in our yard now." James was already standing, already reaching for his car keys. "Madison, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening?" "Yes, Daddy." The word hit him like a physical blow every time she said it. "I'm coming to help you. I'm going to drive to your house right now. Can you and your sisters stay safe until I get there?" "You're really coming?" Hope flooded her voice. "You're going to save us? I'm going to figure this out, I promise. What's your Mommy's phone number so I can call her?" "This is Mommy's phone. She left it when she ran to get help." Of course, he was talking to a child on her mother's phone. "Madison, I need you to tell me your Mommy's full name again, and anything else you know about your family." "Sarah Chen. She's 38, and she's the best Mommy ever, but she's sad a lot because money is scary. And David used to live with us, but then he died and went to heaven and left us the house, but now they say it's not really ours." Madison's voice cracked. "Daddy, why would David lie to us?" David. The name hit James like lightning. David Chen. His younger brother Michael had mentioned a David Chen, his business partner in the tech startup they'd invested in 2 years ago. The partner who died suddenly in that car accident, leaving behind a complicated estate. Michael had been dealing with the legal mess for months before he'd left for his business trip to Singapore. Madison, James said, his voice tight. This David, was he your stepfather? Kinda. He loved Mommy and he loved us. He called us his girls, and he said he'd always take care of us. But then his heart stopped working, and he went to heaven. But the pieces were clicking into place with horrifying clarity. David Chen had been Michael's partner. Michael was Madison's father. Michael, who was currently 35,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, completely unreachable. Michael, who didn't even know he had children. Outside Madison's house, the demolition crew was making final preparations. The lead excavator moved into position, its bucket raised like a mechanical fist ready to strike. Madison, listen to me, James said, grabbing his coat and sprinting toward the elevator. I'm your Uncle James. Your daddy is my brother, and he's away on a trip. But I'm family, and I'm coming to help you right now. Uncle James? Madison's voice was tiny. Are you nice? Will you really help us? I'm going to do everything I can. How long ago did your mommy leave? I don't know. Maybe 10 minutes? The clock is hard to read from here. I'm 25 minutes away. Can you and your sister stay together and stay away from the windows until I get there? Through the phone, he could hear a tremendous crash. Madison screamed. The sound that came through the phone turned James's blood to ice. Crashing, splintering wood. A child's terrified scream. Madison! Madison, are you there? The line had gone dead. James ran through his building's parking garage like a man possessed, his Italian leather shoes sliding on the polished concrete as he fumbled for his Mercedes keys. 25 minutes to Maple Street. He could make it in 15 if he ignored every traffic law in the city. As he tore out of the garage, his mind raced through the impossible situation. Michael's daughter. 3 daughters. How had his brother not known? How had this family been living in poverty while the Worthington fortune sat untouched in Michael's accounts? The traffic on Highway 95 had never moved slower. Every red light felt like a personal insult. Every slow-moving car was a barrier between him and 3 terrified children who thought he was their father. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Michael's ringtone. James almost didn't answer. How do you tell your brother that he's a father 30 seconds before explaining that his daughters are watching their home get demolished? James? Thank God you picked up. Michael's voice was crackling with static from somewhere over the Pacific. I've been trying to reach the lawyers about the Chen estate. There's something strange in the file about dependents that I don't understand. Michael, James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where exactly are you right now? About 4 hours out of Singapore. Why? You sound weird. 4 hours. By the time Michael landed, this crisis would be over one way or another. The Chen estate, James said carefully, weaving between slower cars. Tell me about David's personal life. Not much to tell. He was a private guy, brilliant programmer, but he kept his personal life separate. Why are you asking? I thought that was all settled. A semi-truck was blocking the right lane. James swerved around it, his speedometer hitting 80. Michael, I need you to think carefully. Did David ever mention a girlfriend, a family, children? The static crackled. Children? No, never. He was focused on work. He did mention having an ex-girlfriend once, someone he regretted losing, but that was years ago. James, what's going on? James took a deep breath. There was no gentle way to deliver this news. I just got a call from a 9-year-old girl named Madison. She called me Daddy and begged me to save her house from being demolished. She lives at the address listed in David Chen's estate files. Silence. Then, that's impossible. She has 2 younger sisters. Twins, age 6. Their mother is Sarah Chen, 38 years old. They've been living in David's house for 2 years, believing it was left to them. The static seemed to grow louder. Michael, are you there? Sarah, Michael said quietly. Sarah Chen. You know her? Michael's voice was strange, distant. There was a Sarah. 10 years ago, before I focused on business, we were together for about a year, but I ended it. I thought she wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't the right fit for the lifestyle I wanted. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. She was pregnant, James said. It wasn't a question. She never told me. Oh God, James. She must have tried. I changed my phone number when we broke up. I moved to a different apartment. I wanted a clean break. And David stepped in. David took care of them. Michael's voice cracked. All these years, David was raising my daughters, and I never knew. James was 5 minutes from Maple Street now, racing through residential neighborhoods where the speed limit was a suggestion he ignored. Michael, there's more. The house was never properly transferred to Sarah. She can't read, so she never understood the legal documents. The property was seized for unpaid taxes. They're demolishing it right now. Stop them. I'm trying, but James, stop them. Do whatever it takes. Pay whatever it costs. Those are my daughters. The line crackled with static, then went dead. James tried calling back, but got an automated message about the caller being out of range. Michael was unreachable, flying toward a business meeting in Singapore while his daughters watched their world collapse in real time, and James was their only hope. He turned onto Maple Street and saw the scene immediately. A cluster of yellow demolition equipment surrounded a small duplex while neighbors gathered on porches and sidewalks, watching the drama unfold like some tragic theater. The house was still standing, but barely. One side of the structure had been torn away, exposing rooms like a dollhouse. He could see children's furniture, colorful walls, the intimate details of a family's life now open to the street. A woman with dark hair was screaming at the foreman, gesturing wildly. Sarah Chen, he realized. The mother Michael had abandoned, who had been fighting alone to raise 3 children. James parked his Mercedes in the middle of the street and ran toward the chaos. Stop! He shouted. Stop the demolition. I'm James Worthington, and I'm here to settle the debt. The foreman looked up from his clipboard, annoyed. Sir, you can't just... How much? James pulled out his phone, opening his banking app. The total debt. How much to stop this right now? Sir, it's not that simple. There are procedures. I don't care about procedures. Those are children in there. How much money do you need to drive your machines away and never come back? Sarah Chen turned at the sound of his voice, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Who are you? How did you... Before James could answer, a small figure appeared in the damaged doorway of the house. Madison, blonde curls matted with dust, holding the hands of 2 smaller girls who looked exactly like her. All 3 pairs of eyes were huge with terror and confusion. When Madison saw James, her face transformed. "Daddy!" she cried, and before anyone could stop her, she was running toward him, her sisters close behind. James knelt down as she crashed into his arms, this child who wasn't his daughter but felt like she was. The twins pressed against his sides, seeking comfort from a stranger who represented their only hope. "You came," Madison sobbed against his shoulder. "You really came." Over her head, James met Sarah's bewildered gaze. "We need to talk," he said quietly, "about David, about Michael, and about how we're going to fix this." The foreman cleared his throat. "Sir, the total debt including penalties and fees is $53,412, but there are still legal procedures." "Done," James said, not loosening his hold on the 3 girls. "I'm wiring the money now. Call your supervisor and tell them the property has been redeemed." As he processed the payment on his phone, Madison looked up at him with eyes that held too much wisdom for a 9-year-old. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. James thought about Michael, trapped on a plane, probably trying desperately to call back. He thought about Sarah, who had been fighting alone for so long she'd forgotten what help looked like. He thought about these three little girls who had just learned that sometimes the world could be saved by a phone call to the right person. "Yes," he said, and meant it. "You're safe now." The demolition crew was packing up their equipment, but the damage was done. Half the house lay in ruins, exposing the girls' bedroom like a broken dollhouse. Pink wallpaper fluttered in the afternoon breeze. Stuffed animals lay buried under chunks of drywall. Sarah approached slowly, her eyes moving between James and her daughters, with a mixture of gratitude and confusion that was heartbreaking to witness. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Madison called you Daddy, but you're not. I mean, the girl's father is." She stopped, looking lost. James stood carefully, keeping Madison's hand in his. "Mrs. Chen, can we sit down somewhere? There's a lot we need to discuss." "Our kitchen table is probably buried under half the roof," Sarah said, attempting humor but failing to hide the devastation in her voice. A neighbor, an elderly woman with silver hair, appeared at James's shoulder. "You folks can use my living room," she offered. "I'm Mrs. Patterson from next door. I've been watching this family struggle for 2 years, and I'm glad someone finally showed up to help." 20 minutes later, they sat in Mrs. Patterson's tidy living room, the three girls clustered together on a floral couch, while Sarah perched on the edge of an armchair, looking like she might bolt at any moment. James had chosen the opposite chair, trying to appear non-threatening, while his mind raced through how to explain the impossible situation. Mrs. Patterson brought hot chocolate for the children and coffee for the adults, then discreetly retreated to her kitchen, though James suspected she was listening from around the corner. "Madison," James began gently, "when you called me, you said your name and your sister's names, but you also mentioned David. Can you tell me about him?" Madison's face brightened, despite everything. "David was the best. He wasn't our real daddy, but he loved us, like we were his real daughters. He taught me how to ride a bike, and he helped Chloe learn to swim, and he always made Zoe laugh when she was scared of thunder. He took care of us," Chloe added quietly, her small voice barely audible. "And he promised we'd always have a home," Zoe whispered, glancing toward the window where they could see the remains of their house. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. He was everything to us. When I found out I was pregnant with Madison, her biological father made it clear he didn't want to be involved. I was young and stupid, and I believed him when he said I wasn't good enough for his world." James felt the words like physical blows. Michael's world. The world James himself had helped create, where success was measured in dollars and people were categorized as assets or liabilities. "David found me working 3 part-time jobs, trying to raise Madison alone," Sarah continued. "He was this quiet, brilliant man who looked at us and saw family instead of burden. When I got pregnant with the twins..." She glanced at James, uncertainty flickering across her face. "The twins' father," James prompted gently. "Same man. He never knew about them either. I was too proud to reach out again after how things ended the first time." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "David stepped up without being asked. He said every child deserved a father who chose them. Madison had been listening with the intensity of a child trying to understand adult complexities. Mommy, why didn't our real daddy want us? The question hung in the air like a sword. James felt the weight of Michael's choices, the ripple effects of decisions made in boardrooms and corner offices, where ambition mattered more than connection. Sometimes adults make mistakes, James said carefully. Sometimes they think they know what's best, but they're wrong. His phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. "Mr. Worthington, I've been trying to reach you. There's been an accident, Michael's flight. Please call immediately." James felt the blood drain from his face. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but Madison was watching him with those two wise eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I need to make a quick phone call," James said, standing. "I'll be right back." He stepped into Mrs. Patterson's hallway and dialed his assistant with shaking hands. "James, thank God." Patricia's voice was tight with stress. "I've been trying to reach you for an hour. Michael's plane. There's been some kind of mechanical failure. They've lost communication with the tower." The world tilted. What does that mean exactly? They diverted to an emergency landing in Hawaii, but Patricia's voice broke. "James, they don't know if they made it. The last contact was 3 hours ago." James leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly unsteady. In the living room, 3 little girls were waiting for him to fix their world, not knowing that their biological father might be lost somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. "Keep monitoring the situation," he managed. "Let me know the second you hear anything." D. He hung up and stood there for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. 3 children who had just lost their home might have also lost their father before they ever got the chance to meet him. When he returned to the living room, Madison was helping her sisters with their hot chocolate, her 9-year-old hands steady despite everything she'd been through. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, reading something in his expression. James made a decision. Until he knew Michael's fate for certain, these children needed stability, not more uncertainty. "Everything's going to be fine," he said, settling back into his chair, "but we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean, you and the girls need a place to stay. You need time to figure out your next steps. And I have resources that can help." Madison looked up from her hot chocolate. "Are you really our uncle?" The question was so direct, so trusting, that James felt his heart crack open. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm your Uncle James, and I'm going to take care of you." "All of us?" Chloe asked quietly. "All of you?" Sarah was shaking her head. "We can't accept charity. We've managed on our own this long." "This isn't charity," James interrupted. "This is family." Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the rubble that had once been their home. But inside Mrs. Patterson's living room, something new was being built from the ashes of loss and misunderstanding. James's phone buzzed again. Another text from Patricia. "Still no word on the flight. I'm monitoring all emergency channels." He silenced the phone and looked at the 3 girls who were depending on him. Whatever had happened to Michael, these children needed someone to believe in right now. "Tomorrow," he said, "we're going to start fixing everything." But even as he made the promise, James knew the real challenges were just beginning. How do you tell 3 children that their father is someone they've never met? How do you explain to a man that he has daughters who need him right now? And how do you build a family from the wreckage of misunderstanding and lost time when time itself might have run out? The Worthington Tower had never felt so empty as it did at 6 a.m. the following morning. James stood in his corner office, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold, while his phone remained stubbornly silent. No word from Michael. No word from the airline, no word from anyone who could tell him whether his brother was alive or dead. Behind him, the leather couch that usually served as decoration had been transformed into a makeshift bed, where Madison lay curled under his suit jacket, still wearing yesterday's clothes. She'd refused to leave his side after he'd explained that her Uncle James had a big office where they could stay while they figured everything out. Sarah and the twins were sleeping in the adjacent conference room on couches that cost more than most people's cars. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe, and after yesterday's chaos, safe was all that mattered. James had spent the night making phone calls, pulling strings, and throwing money at problems. By dawn, he'd accomplished the nearly impossible. Emergency temporary guardianship paperwork filed through Child Protective Services, a social worker who agreed to expedite the case due to the unique circumstances, and emergency housing arranged at the Four Seasons until permanent arrangements could be made. The legal victory over the demolition had been just the beginning. His lawyers had found multiple procedural violations in the foreclosure process. Notices delivered to an illiterate tenant without proper accommodation, failure to explore alternatives to foreclosure, and insufficient time allowed for the estate settlement. The house on Maple Street was safe, but it would need extensive repairs before anyone could live there again. More importantly, he'd spent hours on the phone with Child Protective Services, explaining the situation to a surprisingly understanding supervisor named Janet Morrison. "Mr. Worthington," she'd said during their 2 a.m. conversation, "this is highly irregular. We can't simply hand over children to someone because he has money and good intentions. I understand completely. I'm not asking to adopt them tomorrow. I'm asking to ensure they're safe while we locate their biological father and navigate this crisis. The children's mother is present and capable. Why can't she care for them? Because she just lost her home, has no family support system, and is functionally illiterate. She's been working 3 jobs to survive. She needs help, not judgment." There had been a long pause. "We'll need home visits, background checks, interviews with the children and mother. And Mr. Worthington, if this is some kind of savior complex or publicity stunt, we will know." "It's not," James had said simply. "It's family." But none of that would matter if Michael was gone. A soft knock interrupted his brooding. Madison stood in the doorway, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, holding the worn teddy bear that Zoe had let her borrow. "Uncle James, are you sad?" The question hit him harder than any boardroom negotiation ever had. This child, who had lost everything 24 hours ago, was worried about his feelings. "Come here, sweetheart," he said, settling into his desk chair and opening his arms. Madison climbed into his lap with the easy trust of a 9-year-old who had decided he was safe. "Mommy says you're the nicest man she's ever met, except for David. Your mommy is pretty special, too. She works really hard. Sometimes she cries when she thinks we're sleeping, but I hear her." Madison looked up at him with those impossibly wise eyes. "Is she going to have to work 3 jobs anymore?" James felt something shift in his chest, a protective instinct he'd never experienced before. "No, sweetheart, your mommy doesn't have to work 3 jobs anymore." Because you're rich?" The directness of children was both refreshing and terrifying. "Because you're family, and family takes care of each other." Madison was quiet for a moment, processing this concept. She traced patterns on his desk with her small finger, her face serious in the way that only children contemplating big concepts could be. "Uncle James, at school some kids have 2 houses, one with their mommy and one with their daddy. Will we have 2 houses too?" The question revealed the complexity of what lay ahead. "Would you like that?" "I don't know. I like being with mommy, but I think I'd like being with daddy too. But what if Chloe and Zoe get scared without me? They're still little." James marveled at this child's constant concern for her younger sisters. "Madison, you know it's okay to just be 9 years old sometimes, right? You don't always have to take care of everyone." "But who will take care of them if I don't? Your mommy, your daddy, me? You have lots of people who love you now." Madison climbed down from his lap and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing her small hands against the glass as she looked out at the city below. "It's really far down," she said quietly. "Does that scare you?" "A little, but it's pretty too, like being on top of the whole world." She turned back to him. "Uncle James, why didn't our real daddy want us before?" The question he'd been dreading. How do you explain Michael's choices without destroying a child's faith in the possibility of being loved? "Sometimes adults make decisions when they're scared," he said carefully. "Your daddy was young and he thought he wasn't ready to be a good father. That doesn't mean you girls weren't wonderful. It means he made a mistake. Was he scared like I get scared of the dark? Something like that, except instead of being scared of the dark, he was scared of not being good enough, of letting you down." Madison nodded solemnly. "I get scared of that too sometimes. Like when Zoe cries and I don't know how to make her feel better. And what do you do when that happens? I try anyway, even if I might mess up. That's exactly what your daddy should have done, and that's what he's going to do now. But he wants us now. James's throat tightened. If Michael was alive, yes. If Michael had survived whatever had happened to that plane, he would want these children more than anything in the world. But if he hadn't... Yes, James said firmly. He wants you now. His phone buzzed. Patricia's name on the screen. Madison, can you go check on your sisters for a minute? I need to take this call. She slid off his lap and padded toward the conference room, leaving James alone with his racing heart. Patricia, please tell me you have good news. James, they found the plane. He closed his eyes. And emergency landing in Honolulu. All passengers and crew survived. There were some injuries, but... Patricia's voice was bright with relief. Michael is alive. He's in the hospital, but he's conscious and asking for you. James sank into his chair, his entire body flooding with relief so intense it felt like drowning in reverse. How bad are his injuries? Broken leg, some bruising, mild concussion. He'll be fine, but he can't fly for at least 2 weeks. What exactly happened up there? Engine failure over the Pacific. The pilot managed a water landing about 50 miles from Oahu. Coast Guard had them all within an hour, but it was touch and go for a while. Patricia's voice carried the weight of how close they'd come to disaster. Michael specifically asked me to tell you he loves you and to take care of his girls. The words hit James like a physical blow. His girls. Michael had never even met them, but they were already his girls. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to figure out how to tell 3 little girls that their father was a stranger who lived on the other side of the country. 2 weeks to help Michael understand that fatherhood wasn't a choice he could make gradually. Patricia, I need you to set up a video call, secure line, tonight if possible. And prepare the legal team. We're going to need them. Already on it. I've also taken the liberty of clearing your schedule for the next month. And James, I've never heard you sound like this before. Like what? Like someone who finally found what he was looking for. After hanging up, James sat in the early morning quiet, watching Manhattan wake up below him. The city that had once represented everything he'd achieved now felt like just a backdrop to something infinitely more important. Through the glass walls of his office, he could see Sarah helping the twins brush their teeth in the executive washroom, her movements gentle and patient despite everything she'd been through. Madison was arranging the cushions on the conference room couch with the meticulous care of a child who had learned that creating order was sometimes the only way to feel safe in chaos. In a few hours, he'd have to tell Sarah that her daughter's biological father was alive and wanted to be part of their lives. He'd have to explain to Michael that fatherhood wasn't a choice he could make gradually, and he'd have to tell 3 little girls that their real daddy was ready to love them, even if he'd been too scared to do it before. Madison appeared in the doorway again, now dressed in clothes that Patricia had arranged to be delivered during the night. Designer children's clothing that probably cost more than Sarah used to make in a week. Uncle James, Chloe wants to know if we can have pancakes. Of course you can have pancakes, he said, standing and taking her hand. In fact, I think this is a pancakes and good news kind of morning. Good news? Very good news, sweetheart. Your daddy is coming home. Madison stopped walking and looked up at him with those impossibly wise eyes. Is he hurt? James knelt down to her level. A little bit. He was in an accident, but he's okay now. He's in the hospital, but just for a few days. Will we get to talk to him? Tonight on the computer. You'll get to see his face and everything. Madison was quiet for a moment, processing this monumental information. Uncle James? What if he doesn't like us? The question broke James's heart. Madison, sweetheart, he's going to love you. All of you. More than anything in the world. How do you know? Because I met you yesterday, and I already love you more than anything in the world, and he's your daddy. Daddies are supposed to love even harder than uncles. The video call was set for 3 p.m. Pacific time, which meant 6 p.m. in New York, right after the girls had finished the dinner that room service had delivered to James's office. Madison sat in the big leather chair, with Chloe and Zoe pressed against her sides like blonde bookends. Sarah stood behind them, her hands resting protectively on Madison's shoulders. The afternoon had been spent in careful preparation. James had worked with Sarah to explain to the girls what they might expect, while trying not to build up expectations too high. The twins had spent an hour deciding what to wear, finally settling on matching blue dresses that made their eyes look like sapphires. Madison had been quieter, more thoughtful, carrying the weight of being the big sister who would need to help her younger siblings navigate this momentous moment. "What if he doesn't sound like I imagined?" Chloe had asked, while Sarah brushed her hair. "Then we'll get used to how he really sounds," Madison had answered with the wisdom of a 9-year-old who had learned that adaptation was survival. Now, as they waited for the connection, the tension in the room was palpable. James had positioned himself just out of camera range, close enough to provide support, but far enough away to let this moment belong to the family that was meeting each other for the first time. Sarah had been silent most of the day, processing emotions that James could only imagine. This was the man who had left her pregnant and alone, but also the father of her children, and now potentially their salvation. The screen flickered to life, revealing Michael's face in a hospital bed, his left leg elevated in a cast, a bandage covering a cut on his forehead. But his eyes were bright and focused as he stared at the 3 little girls who shared his features. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Madison, who had been chattering nervously all day, seemed to have lost her voice. Chloe and Zoe pressed closer to their big sister, overwhelmed by finally seeing the face that had been a mystery their entire lives. James could see Michael struggling with his own emotions, this successful businessman reduced to speechlessness by the sight of the daughters he'd never known existed. Michael spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Hi, girls, I'm your daddy." "You look different than I thought," Madison said quietly. "I thought you'd have a beard." Michael laughed, a sound caught between joy and tears. "Would you like me to grow a beard? Maybe David had a beard sometimes." Madison's voice was careful, testing this new relationship. "Uncle James said you were on an airplane and it broke." "Something like that, but I'm okay now." Michael's eyes moved from Madison to the twins. "Chloe? Zoe? Do you know which one is which?" The twins giggled, their first real sound since the call began. "I'm Chloe," said Chloe, pointing to the tiny freckle on her left cheek. "I have a freckle." "And I'm Zoe. I don't have a freckle, but I have a scar on my hand from when I tried to help Mommy cook." "Can I see?" Michael asked gently. Zoe held up her small hand, showing a barely visible line across her palm. "That makes you very brave," Michael said. "I have scars too. Want to see?" He showed them a surgical scar on his shoulder from an old skiing accident, and suddenly the conversation became easier. Children and scars and stories, the universal language of connection. "Does it hurt?" Chloe asked, leaning closer to the screen. "Not anymore." "But it did when it happened. I was being silly and tried to ski down a mountain that was too hard for me." "Mommy says being silly is okay as long as you don't hurt anyone," Zoe offered. "Your mommy is very smart," Michael said, his eyes finding Sarah over the girls' heads. "She works really hard," Madison said, her protective instincts kicking in. "She has 3 jobs, and she's tired all the time, but she still makes us pancakes on Sundays and reads us stories even when she can't read some of the words." Michael's face crumpled slightly at this revelation. "She can't read some of the words." "Nah, Mommy has trouble with reading," Madison explained matter-of-factly, "but she's learning now. Uncle James got her a teacher." James watched as understanding dawned on Michael's face. The unopened legal notices, the foreclosure proceeding without Sarah's knowledge, the cascade of problems that illiteracy had created. Sarah had been silent through most of the exchange, but now she stepped slightly into camera range. "Hello, Michael." "Sarah." His voice changed, becoming deeper, more serious. I don't know how to apologize for 10 years. "You don't have to apologize to me," Sarah said quietly, though James could hear the years of hurt beneath her words. "But you owe them an explanation they can understand." "Sarah, there's something else." Michael's voice grew heavier. "About David. About how he knew to save my number as emergency in your phone." Sarah's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "David knew who I was. From the beginning. When he met you, when he took care of the girls. He knew they were mine." The silence in the room was deafening. Even the children seemed to sense that something monumental was being revealed. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "David and I weren't just business partners. We were friends first, college roommates. When he told me about this amazing woman he'd met, a single mother with a little girl. Sarah, he described you perfectly, but he never told me your last name, and I never made the connection." Sarah sank into a chair behind the children. "He knew. All this time, he knew. I think he figured it out when the twins were born. They look exactly like me at that age, but instead of telling me, he—" Michael's voice broke. "He protected you. He protected them. He knew I wasn't ready to be a father, and he made sure they had one who was." James felt his heart break for everyone in this impossible situation. David Chen hadn't just been a stepfather. He'd been a guardian angel who'd sacrificed his own chance at honesty to ensure 3 little girls had a father who truly wanted them. "Is that why he programmed your number?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. "He told me once, about a year before he died, that if anything ever happened to him, there were people who might need help. He made me promise that if anyone ever called that number, I'd drop everything and help them. He said it was the most important promise I'd ever make." Madison had been listening with the intense focus of a child trying to understand adult complexity. "So, David knew you were our real daddy, but he didn't tell you because he wanted to be our daddy instead." "No, sweetheart," Michael said gently. "David wanted to be your daddy, and wanted me to be ready to be your daddy too. He was waiting for the right time to tell everyone the truth." "But he died before he could tell us," Chloe said sadly. "Yes, but he made sure you'd be able to find me when you needed me most." Michael looked directly at Madison. "Madison, do you remember Uncle James explaining that sometimes adults make mistakes because they're scared?" "Yes. I was very scared when I was younger. I thought I wasn't good enough to be anybody's daddy, so I ran away instead of trying to learn how to be better." His voice was steady, but James could see the tears threatening. "That was the biggest mistake I ever made." "But you're not scared anymore?" Chloe asked. "I'm still a little scared," Michael admitted, "because I've never been a daddy before, and I want to be really good at it, but I'm not too scared to try anymore." "What if you mess up?" Zoe asked. "Mommy says everybody messes up sometimes." "Then I'll say I'm sorry and try to do better. That's what people do when they love each other." Madison had been quiet during this exchange, studying her father's face with the intensity of a child trying to solve a complex puzzle. "Are you rich like Uncle James?" she asked suddenly. Sarah made a small sound of embarrassment, but Michael smiled. "Yes, I am." "Good," Madison said firmly. "Because Mommy shouldn't have to cry about money anymore." The simple statement hung in the air, carrying the weight of years of struggle and a child's fierce love for her mother. "She'll never have to cry about money again," Michael promised. "Any of you." "Will we live with you?" Chloe asked. "Would you like to live with me?" The twins looked at Madison, deferring to their big sister as they always did. Madison was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Will Mommy live with us too? Michael's eyes found Sarah's again. That would be up to your mommy. I want us all to stay together, Madison said firmly. We're a family. Families stay together. You're absolutely right, Michael said. Families do stay together. James watched from the side as his brother talked to his daughters, seeing Michael transform before his eyes. The driven businessman was disappearing, replaced by a man who was discovering what really mattered. When can you come home? Zoe asked. The doctors say 2 weeks. But Uncle James is going to take care of you until I can get there. Is that okay? All three girls looked at James, then back at the screen. Uncle James is really nice, Chloe announced. He bought us hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. And he said we can go to a good school, Madison added. And he lets us sleep in his office, Zoe concluded. And he smells like the fancy soap in the bathroom, Chloe added, which made everyone laugh. I'm very grateful to Uncle James, Michael said, meeting James's eyes over the girls' heads, a look of gratitude so profound it needed no words. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from favorite colors to whether they liked pizza. They did, to what they wanted to be when they grew up. Madison wanted to be a doctor, Chloe wanted to be a teacher, and Zoe couldn't decide between astronaut and veterinarian. Finally, when the twins were starting to yawn and lean heavily against Madison, Michael said the words that changed everything. I love you, he said suddenly. I know that might sound strange coming from someone you just met, but I loved you before I even knew you existed. I love you because you're brave and kind and you take care of each other. I love you because you're mine, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again. Madison was quiet for a long moment. Then, we love you too, Daddy. The words broke something open in Michael's chest. James could see it happen the moment his brother's carefully constructed walls crumbled completely. I'll be home soon, Michael whispered. I promise. Daddy. Zoe's small voice was sleepy. Will you read us stories when you get home? Every night if you want me to. Even the long ones? Especially the long ones. After the call ended, the girls were subdued but happy, processing this monumental change in their lives. Sarah helped them get ready for bed in the conference room, while James made more phone calls, arranging for permanent housing, setting up trust funds, calling in every favor he'd ever earned to make their transition as smooth as possible. Later, after everyone was asleep, James stood at his office windows again, looking out at the city that had shaped both him and Michael into the men they'd become. Successful men, but not necessarily good men. Not until now. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Thank you for saving them. Thank you for saving me. James typed back, that's what family does. But as he looked at the sleeping forms of Sarah and the three girls who had transformed his sterile office into something that felt like home, James realized he was the one who had been saved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal custody arrangements, school enrollments, the complex dance of building relationships that should have existed all along. But tonight, for the first time in his adult life, James Worthington understood what it felt like to be part of a real family. 2 weeks later, James stood in the arrivals terminal at JFK International Airport, holding Madison's hand, while Chloe and Zoe pressed against his legs, all of them watching the gate where Michael's plane would arrive any moment. The past 14 days had been a whirlwind of transformation. Sarah had quit 2 of her 3 jobs and was working part-time at a literacy center, finally learning to read with the same determination she'd once applied to surviving. The girls were enrolled at Westminster Academy, where Madison was already showing signs of the same intellectual brilliance that ran in the Worthington family. They'd moved into a townhouse on the Upper East Side, 5 bedrooms and a backyard where the twins could play safely. Sarah had cried when she saw it, not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing her daughters would never be homeless again. But through all the changes, the girls had maintained their countdown. 12 more days until Daddy comes home. 8 more days. 4 more days. And now, finally, it was today. There! Madison pointed toward the gate. I see him! Michael emerged from the jetway on crutches, his legs still in a walking cast, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found his family. The man who'd gotten on that plane 2 weeks ago had been a successful businessman flying to another deal. The man walking toward them now was simply a father coming home to his children. The twins broke away from James and ran toward Michael, who dropped his crutches and caught them in his arms, his healing leg be damned. Madison followed more cautiously, still the protective big sister, but when Michael opened one arm to include her in the embrace, she melted into it like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Sarah approached slowly, hanging back to let Michael have his moment with the girls. But when he looked up at her over their blonde heads, the gratitude in his eyes was unmistakable. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking care of them, for raising them to be so incredible. They did that themselves, Sarah replied. I just tried to keep up. James watched the reunion from a respectful distance, feeling both included and separate from this moment that belonged to them. His phone buzzed with messages from the office, problems that needed solving, deals that required his attention. But for once, he ignored them all. Uncle James, Madison called. Come here. He approached the group and Michael stood carefully, balancing on his good leg. I don't know how to thank you, Michael said. You saved them. You saved all of us. You don't need to thank me, James replied. But you do need to keep being the man they saw on that video call. They've been through enough disappointment. I won't let them down again. I know you won't. Michael looked at his daughters, then at Sarah, then back at James. I want you to be part of this, not just the emergency backup uncle, but really part of this family. These girls need all the love they can get. Madison tugged on James's jacket. Does that mean you'll come to my school play next month? Wouldn't miss it, James said, and realized he meant it more than he'd ever meant any business commitment. As they walked through the airport together, Michael on crutches, Sarah carrying Zoe, James holding hands with Madison and Chloe, they looked like what they were, a family that had been broken and reassembled in a new configuration, stronger for having been tested. Uncle James, Madison said as they reached the car. I'm glad I called the wrong number. It wasn't the wrong number, sweetheart, James replied, helping her into the back seat. It was exactly the right number. You just didn't know it yet. 6 months later, James stood in the backyard of the Upper East Side townhouse, watching Michael push Madison on the swing set he'd insisted on installing, despite the twins' argument that they were too old for swings. Chloe and Zoe were attempting to teach Sarah how to play soccer, with mixed results, but lots of laughter. The house was full of noise now. Children's voices, Sarah's laughter, Michael's terrible jokes, the everyday chaos of family life. It was nothing like the quiet perfection of James's penthouse apartment, and it was absolutely perfect. Madison ran over to where James sat reading on the patio. Uncle James, Daddy says you're coming to dinner on Sunday, and Mommy's making her famous spaghetti. Except it's not really famous, we just call it that. I'll be there, James promised. And Uncle James, next week is my birthday, and I get to make 3 wishes when I blow out the candles. 3 wishes? That's a lot of responsibility? Madison leaned close as if sharing a secret. I already know what they are. First, I wish for Mommy and Daddy to get married so we can all have the same last name. Second, I wish for a puppy, but don't tell Mommy because she says we're not ready for that much responsibility yet. And the third wish? Madison looked across the yard at her family, her father teaching Zoe how to kick the soccer ball, her mother laughing as Chloe demonstrated her cartwheel technique, everyone together in the golden afternoon light. The third wish, is that we never have to be scared again, that we always have each other and we always have home. James followed her gaze, taking in this impossible family that had been built from a desperate phone call and a willingness to believe in second chances. "I think that's a wish that's already come true," he said quietly. Madison smiled, the carefree smile of a 9-year-old who had learned that sometimes the world could be trusted after all. "Yeah," she said, running back toward her family. "I think so too." As James watched them play in the fading sunlight, he reflected on the phone call that had changed everything. A little girl's voice saying, "Daddy, they're tearing down our house," had torn down the walls around his heart instead. They'd all been lost in different ways. Sarah, struggling to raise 3 children alone. Michael, running from responsibilities he was afraid to face. James himself, successful but isolated, wealthy but empty. But sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what you were looking for all along. And sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right call at exactly the right time. In the end, it wasn't money or power or influence that had saved them. It was the simple decision to show up for each other, to choose love over fear, to build something beautiful from the rubble of their mistakes. The demolition crew had torn down a house on Maple Street, but from its ruins they'd built something much more valuable. They'd built a home.